The legendary pillars of Dipset Camron and Jim Jones were detained during a violent brawl backstage that left security startled and the hip-hop community in full disbelief, according to alarming reports from Miami. This news has shook the music business to its core. Several accounts claim that what was meant to be a successful reunion, the performance turned into a full-fledged battle between two ex-brothers and weapons. According to eyewitnesses, it started as a furious dispute over the performance order, but swiftly got out of hand, resulting in fists being thrown, angry words being spoken, and total anarchy. In a matter of minutes, there were smashed equipment, flashing police lights, and broken egos. As cameras rolled on social media, Camron and Jim were apparently handcuffed and removed, surprising viewers who questioned, is this really the end of Dips? Oh, what could have caused such a public outburst between two people? Legends? Keep an eye out because what's about to happen isn't just surprising. It's the kind of unfiltered emotional drama that nobody anticipated, and believe us, it's only the beginning. It all started on a night that was meant to be a celebration, when fans gathered to witness Dipset Camron's eagerly anticipated reunion. People wearing vintage Dipset gear, listening to legendary songs on their phones, and swapping anecdotes about how these musicians affected an entire hip-hop era made the place a hive of nostalgia. But no one was aware that tension had been accumulating for weeks behind the scenes, and it was going to blow out tonight in a way that would alter everything. Around midnight, rumors began to circulate, which quickly evolved into frenetic social media messages and shortly after, backstage film clips. At first, the unsteady film blurred, making it hard to understand what was happening. It was clear that Jim Jones and Camron were having a heated disagreement, and it wasn't just words. Equipment was destroyed, voices were amplified to deafening levels, and chairs were overturned. The films left viewers in a state of shock, bewilderment, and heartbreak. Sources claim that the fight began over a setlist modification, which is a trivial matter. Jim Jones' solo smash, We Fly High, appears to have been his choice to open the event. Camron, however, insisted on continuing with a traditional Dipset track that ought to have been a minor. Reopening old wounds led to an argument that went beyond control. Jim claimed that Cam was always attempting to dominate the conversation. In response, Cam accused Jim of betraying the group by going off alone when it was falling apart. It was a quack chamber. The room was crowded with stylists, assistants, and security personnel. They were all attempting to diffuse the tension. However, neither one was going to back down. One crew member described the experience as like watching a family implode in front of us. It wasn't just a physical fight. With both men, it was emotional, calling out things that had been long forgotten. According to reports, Jim said, "You left me out. It's too dry when I most needed you." Outside, people were agitated as the mayhem broke out backstage. After over an hour of the show's delay, people were beginning to converse, unaware of what was happening, and unaware that their beloved musicians were being restrained. Cam retorted, "You've always been jealous of me." Those close to the group acknowledged that while they had previously made amends in public, they never really worked things out behind closed doors tonight. After security phoned the police to report a violent brawl that injured two staff members, the crowd outside the venue watched in disbelief as the two were brought into separate police cars. When police got on the scene, they were attempting to separate Cam and Jim, resulting in one of them suffering a sprained wrist and the other a busted lip. As they were being pulled apart, they found that both rappers were still yelling at one another and were obviously bruised. A crew member had captured Camron's furious face on camera as he was led away in handcuffs. What should have been a victorious comeback had turned into a nightmare. Their names were chanted by fans. Others just captured the event in startled silence, while others begged them to stop. Media outlets grabbed up the story in a matter of minutes. Additionally, stories like Reunion Ends in Pandemonium and Camron and Jim Jones detained after backstage fight were all over social media. In interviews, others shared old footage of the two smiling together, remembering their closeness and contrasting it with the recent dramatic breakup. For many fans, the betrayal felt personal. Additionally, one person on Twitter commented, "We grew up on Dipset. Seems like our big brothers fighting." According to those familiar with the matter, both men were shaken not only by the fight but also by the realization of how far they had fallen. Jim continued to pace, asking how it had come to this point, while Cam simply sat with his head down. Cam and Jim were placed in separate holding cells inside the jail that night, and despite the prompt arrival of their legal teams, the damage was already done. Some were furious, and others said they saw it coming from a mile away. According to one crew member, Jill Santana was getting ready and his Jules yelled, "Not like this man. Not after everything we've been through." He was tempted to mediate once he realized things were getting heated in the dressing room, but by the time he reached them, it was too late. According to an insider, he broke down backstage and needed to be consoled by his squad after seeing two of his closest friends taken away by police. The impact was swift, and fans demanded refunds as sponsors pulled out of the tour. Event planners began to believe that this would be the final straw because they were already on thin ice, and one promoter suggested that this might be the end. The drama was exacerbated on social media as fans argued over who was to blame, with some accusing Jim of being aggressive and insecure and others of Camron being overbearing. Regardless of the stance taken, even though it was clear that the Dipsets might be coming to an end, other artists took to social media to share their sorrow and wish for peace, with one post saying, "Come on, fix it before it's too late. There aren't many males this size." Another said, "Hip-hop requires you to be united, not divided like this." It was uncertain if Cam and Jim would hear those words, but one thing was certain: as the city tried to process what had just happened and the dust cleared, nothing would ever be the same again. A few hours after the fight, while Jim Jones was still in detention, an unforeseen incident happened the next morning, and a voicemail that was purportedly from him and was recorded began to leak. Jim's voice was low, tired, and filled with agony as he delivered the message, speaking slowly as though each word weighed him down. "I'm not even mad at Cam," he revealed. "I'm mad at myself." No one was able to confirm the authenticity of the audio, spread as wildfire initially. By midday, it was being reposted on prominent hip-hop pages with captions such as "Jim Jones regrets everything," and "The conclusion did bite harder than we anticipated." Supporters were split, with some feeling sympathy for the people close to Camron maintained he hadn't said a word in public, let tweets, Instagram stories, or even a cryptic post stand, while others questioned whether the voicemail was a deliberate move. Behind the scenes, things were far more hectic than anybody could have expected. While Jules Santana was doing everything he could to keep things from falling apart completely, he was upset with the fight and the speed at which Jim's camp had started damage control. He feels that Jim is trying to fabricate the tale, and according to one insider, Cam feels deceived once more. Cam and Jin were unprepared for the fight, which had not only damaged a pot but also exposed long-standing wounds in the hip-hop community. Artists who had previously admired the group began to voice their dissatisfaction, while others shared their disappointment. Stories of previous conflicts they had personally witnessed, and even Freaky Zeke, who had always been the comic relief, fell silent. His team issued a brief statement expressing their deep sadness over the events and requesting that fans allow the group time to recover. Later that evening, a new video clip from in contrast to the earlier fan film videos, this one was extremely clear, capturing the moment Camron pushed Jim into a stack of speaker cases, followed by Jim swinging back and toppling a table. The backstage security camera of the venue was leaked, and although the video was silent, the violence was obvious, and fans where the video went viral, and news outlets used hashtags like #sportsreplay as they were horrified to see their icons act in such a way. The illusion of unity that Daped had been trying to maintain for a long time abruptly collapsed to pull Jim away while a security guard pushed Cam back against a wall. The fight became a media circus, with talk shows referring to it as the week's biggest pop culture moment and interviews being sought. But behind the scenes, the experts said that Jim's stance demonstrated deep-seated frustration and his movement revealed emotional instability. The fallout was getting very real. According to one insider, the Dipset tour put everything on hold, future dates were canceled, contracts were frozen, and all reunion-related merchandise was taken off the shelves. Cam's team accused him of being manipulative and caused financial ruin. Cam, who is known for his sharp tongue and vicious clapbacks, finally stayed silent for 2 days before sharing a black screen on Instagram with the caption, "Sometimes silence speaks." Dozens of tech crew members and staff dancers who had been relying on the tour for work were caught in the middle of this. Fans were confused more than words about whether it was shade, acceptance, or the end, and there was a lot of speculation in the comment area as some people criticized Cam for his passive-aggressive approach while others begged for a truce. Jim, Jones, meantime, provided a quick, clearly adding, "We're supposed to be legends, not a headline," during an emotional Instagram live. "I feel bad about what I did. I'm not alone in losing my temper. It's anticipated." This further fueled the flames. Jim was accused by Cam's supporters of Jim's supporters defended him by claiming that he was at least admitting to gaslighting. And in all of this chaos, Dipset's reputation was slowly disintegrating. Podcasts dedicated entire episodes to the dispute, and radio stations took tracks off their daily playlists. One host said, "This is what happens when ego goes unchecked for too long," while another compared it to the fall of June, and some said it was the most public group outburst since Mwe. The most surprising development of all was when a woman came forward to claim that she witnessed the fight and that it was a woman and had nothing to do with music. She claimed that Camron had been romantically linked with the same woman for years with Jim Jones, because it was spicy, scandalous, and precisely the kind of twist meme lovers adore. The internet didn't care. It burst once again now, enclosing the battle as a failed love triangle. Others were disappointed, stating that two legends shouldn't sacrifice decades of history for a lady. But whether the anecdote was accurate or not, it altered the story again. That tension has returned to the surface due to recent events. According to her, Jim had found out that Cam had. The argument backstage began when he covertly reconnected with her. Although Jim and Cam were both out on bail, the court mandated that they stay apart until the matter was settled. However, the irony that the two men who had once traveled the world together could no longer be in the same room was not missed on anyone. Attorneys were engaged, damage repair crews put in extra hours, and the hip-hop scene watched to see what would come next. They were unable to look away as they watched the gang disintegrate and watched lives play out in real time. However, that was right before it seemed like everything had blown up. As time passed and the general public tensions behind the scenes grew progressively as Camron and Jim Jones faced with more than just their personal violation as everyone waited in expectation, they were also coping with the consequences of their behavior, which caused division among their close friends and family, the media, and fans. The reality was that nobody was entirely certain of Dipset's future. Had the harm been irreversible? Or could they rescue what remained of their legacy? Camron, who was supposed to be calm, had failed, usually filled with jokes and cryptic messages. His social media profiles have turned into oddly quiet following the event. Supporters, particularly those who had been with Camron for years, were starting to worry since they had never seen him this way. Camron was usually the one to turn a complicated situation into something amusing. However, his posts were devoid of humor this time. He wasn't posting at all. Although Jen Jones was more vocal, his Twitter feed was flooded with remarks regarding the circumstance, including apologies to Camron himself, as well as to followers and supporters. Fans weren't entirely in agreement with his tweet, which said, "It's been a rough road, but I'm learning and growing." Aboard. While some praised him for owning up to his shortcomings, others thought it was a ruse to regain the affection he had lost. "But it doesn't change the reality that the damage is done," a fan commented. "Jim, we won't forget what happened." Nevertheless, despite the drama and public controversy, there was a sense that all would eventually come to a conclusion. The conflicting responses only appeared to feed the flames. Did one of the most illustrious hip-hop ensembles ever come to an end with Dipset's definitive breakup? Time were the subject of a flurry of gossip, with some sources claiming that Camron and Jim Jones had not spoken in days and others voicing the possibility of a reconciliation, albeit with restrictions. Supporters were split. Some people continued to believe in the group's power and the connection that had brought years ago, while others felt deceived and their allegiance completely shattered. According to people close to him, Jules Santana, who had always acted as a mediator between the two, was caught in the middle of everything and expressed frustration and hurt, despite the fact that all of that looked to Jules was resolved to fix the job that was falling apart. He was aware that he had to take the first step if there was any hope that things might improve. He decided to take matters into his own hands and made separate attempts to arrange a private meeting with Camron and Jim Jones. It had to be face-to-face, he knew. There was no more mysterious texts, no more phone calls. It had to be real. Jules managed to bring them both together after a few hard days. This was a momentous occasion because the two had agreed for the first time since the altercation The two guys sat across from one another, and there was an unpleasant silence in the room. The air was heavy with the weight of their past and their recent fallout, but there was a lot of tension in the air when they did sit down. Camron was unusually silent for someone who is known for his quick wit and sharp tongue. Conversely, Jim Jones was more forthcoming, had considered the ramifications of his behavior, and was prepared to discuss everything. "You know, Jim," he began slowly, "after what happened, I never imagined that I'd be sitting here with you. You treated me disrespectfully in front of fans and family members. I want to make things right now, even though I know I can't go back. Cam, I want us to move past this," Jim Jones said, clearly regretting what he had said. "Jim, you've stated it before. However, words are not as powerful as deeds." There was clearly still a great deal of hurt and mistrust between them. However, as the discussion continued, there were moments when it appeared that a reconciliation may be possible. For a minute, Camron seemed to consider his options, their common history, which includes Dipset's heyday as a top rap artist. For a minute, it felt like they were back in the studio, collaborating to create magic, as they laughed and remembered. But eventually, reality hit in. The road to recovery would not be easy, and the harm was already done. The anticipation was killing supporters who were still waiting for Camron and Jim Jones to make a public comment. They sought clarification and to find out if Dipset was really over or if they could reconcile. They flooded social media with requests for information and an update. As the moment arrived, Camron sent a new, succinct message on Instagram that said, "Sometimes the strongest friendships are." Jim Jones followed suit with an honest message, adding, "We've been down too long. We're stronger than this. Tried. We've been through a lot. We'll figure it out. Stay tuned." The lack of detailed responses in these letters offered admirers optimism that maybe Dipay wasn't over after all. Stay with us. However, it was still unclear if it was too little too late. Could the fans pardon them for the pain they both endured? What caused them? The hip-hop community kept a careful eye on Camron and Jim Jones, two legends who had dominated the rap game together, as they battled for their legacy as the story developed. Would they manage to recover? Or was Dad truly gone? The backstage altercation became widely known, like wildfire, completely upending the hip-hop industry. No one was able to stop the violent altercation between Camron and Jim Jones, two original members of the renowned band Dipset. Years of unresolved emotions between the two performers were claimed to have contributed to the swift escalation of the backstage confrontation. Both Camron and Jim Jones were detained on the scene after reportedly exchanging insults and then getting into a violent brawl. As the fight's specifics came to light, fans, media outlets, and even their peers in the profession were shocked. What was a night of festivities swiftly descended into mayhem, and it suddenly appeared as though Dipay's future was in jail. The incident left fans wondering if the two iconic characters could ever repair their damaged relationship. Disregarded witnesses at the scene claimed that security had to step in, but by then the damage was done. In the days that followed, there were reports regarding the reason behind the altercation quickly circulated, with some arguing that it was a personal dispute between the two and others suggesting that there were more serious issues within the organization. Fans who have already watched Jim Jones and Camron Jones were brothers, and now arms were left to question whether they could, if they were able to,